Hey everybody, it's the Mad Master here. I'm doing a video today, and this is kind of a video about why I followed the conspiracy narrative with regards to everything that had happened the last 2.5 years with regards to the virus stuff. And this is kind of an explanation of where these thought processes came from and where these narratives came from and why I was so suspicious of everything. So I, I've done videos about this before, but I really want to go into depth, really where I think this mistrust came from. And one thing I thought about is that you listen to I was into like Art Bell and like George Norrie and Coast to Coast AM as a teenager because people at my school where I went to were like, "Man, it's so far out. You got to hear this radio show late at night, Coast to Coast AM," and they talked about aliens and ghosts and conspiracies and stuff. So I started listening to that, and I also was very interested in the JFK thing as a kid too because I went to JFK in the theater, and it had the movie JFK, and it had a profound effect on me as a youngster because like I was like, wow, all this stuff happened. This is crazy. We can't trust these people, blah, blah, blah. And I read some books about it, the Jim Garrison book. And, there's a lot of problems with the Jim Garrison narrative, but still, that really got me on this conspiracy theorist train. I'm just going to say, you know, what is it called? The truther or whatever, twofer, whatever the fuck they say. I don't know. That's really what got me on that train. So when the virus crisis, as I call it, happened, I didn't know what to think. So, okay, so I actually did downplay it quite a bit. I was like, okay, it's another like swine flu or SARS or whatever. It's going to die down in a couple weeks, That's what I first thought. Now, I think what happened is that I also watched a few people that denied it existed because there was a movie Wag the Dog that came out in the 90s, and combined with the narrative that a lot of people, the New World Order narrative or like the globalist narrative or whatever you want to call it, if you combine a lot of the stuff that they talked about, the political machinations of these people and how things worked, it would come to the conclusion that this is it's either fake or exaggerated. Like that process did happen in me early on. I'd say like maybe February 2020 through a little bit of March. And I was questioning it. I was like, I don't know if, I said I didn't know if it existed. And I'm just explaining this now because I feel like it was probably wrong for me to jump to that conclusion, but I'm just giving you the background about why this may have been crossing my mind because it was the wag the dog thing came up a lot, especially like after the Gulf War, the Iraq War, a lot of what was happening with 9/11 and stuff, and all the the questionable things with that, like the passports intact that they found on the ground and all this stuff. I mean, a lot of it seemed pretty suspicious, just the way that it came about all of a sudden with the way they were communicating things. And of course, I talked about this at length in other videos, but the new normal thing, like, it's like you would have it that, okay, the media is controlled by this shadow cabal, and they'll try to propagandize to people about how we're going to live from now on, the new normal, and you could tie it into the whole AI transhumanism thing that they're talking to people, conspiracy people are talking about now. Like Whitney Webb is talking about that too. Tim Dillon was talking about it on a podcast I was just watching from like 2 years ago or something, or a year ago. So you can tie these things together, and it was pretty scary and frightening to me because I was like, okay, this sounds pretty out there, but it seems like they're pushing towards this thing because these articles were so bizarre. They all came at once. It was like this new normal we'll never shake hands again. Obviously, that was a lie because I shake hands, I fist bump. I don't elbow bump. People just elbow bump is so damn retarded. Anyways, so I thought that there was definitely some kind of nefarious thing going on because of just the way the articles were all at once, all these articles. Like at first it was in denial of it. Oh, it's no big deal, like Fox, and then the infamous Pelosi statements about going to Chinatown and stuff during the Chinese New Year and all that stuff. It was creepy as hell after that, though. So I don't know if I didn't think it was real. I just thought it was severely exaggerated. And what happened is that I realized, so this is why the things were so scary through 2021 for me, because there was, and this is all tied into digital currency things, central bank digital currency and all the stuff that they talk about, and why this is why I did all these videos and why I was so afraid, is because a lot of what the whole conspiracy culture has been about is like this centralized control, and like they had to have some kind of event, to event 201 sorry some kind of event to push this catalyst forward into this new thing that we have to live by. And that was the whole thing. I mean, I didn't even realize how much there was in the truth culture about these types of things, because there was even a David Icke interview from 1998. You can look it up. It was Art Bell, where he mentioned central bank digital currency. I kid you not. He was talking about that stuff in 1998. Like, it's so bizarre that these people, namely like, David Icke or the man himself, who I will not mention, I'll just say Alexander the Jones. How bizarre. Or, what's his name? Bill Cooper, all these people. It's so bizarre how these events that happen, starting about 2.5 years ago, seem to be so prescient. Like the way that they talked about it. Oh, like, and James Corbett talked about it in 2009. Like, oh, we're going to have this thing happen and you're going to have to, you have to have this passport to go places and all this stuff. So there was no pandemic during that time. I mean, 2009 obviously was, swine flu was sort of a pandemic, of course, was declared one, but there was nothing about like that, the passports or like, I mean, I think even like Bitcoin was like at its infancy at that time. So like a lot of these things that were talked about these previous times, which I had been into, because I had been into the stuff for a long time. I mean, by the time the Cervenka virus came, I'll just use code words again. I had been into this stuff for like 30 years. I mean, pretty much. I mean, starting in like middle school, where I was, reading books and stuff, and like watching, movies about it. And it kind of waned and went back and forth, because like at one point I did believe like the Democrats were better than Republicans and all this bullshit. But like, just some of the stuff was like, it was so ingrained in me, that distrust of the government. I mean, it's like, because of all this stuff that has happened. I mean, it's been since like 1963, because 1963 really is the catalyst for, if you look at history, even like with the Iraq stuff, like a lot of the same Alberto Gonzalez, like I believe he was one of them. Like these people, a lot of these people that are in power, the Bushes, all these people that were in power, that went through all these crises, like Iran Contra, you had Bay of Pigs, you had the Kennedy thing, which is suspicious, of course. You had Vietnam, Iran Contra, all this stuff that happened, and a lot of the same names pop up too. So it was very suspicious. And I'm not talking about with COVID, but I'm just saying, like, you see a lot of the same figures in a lot of these. You see these patterns that happen, these same type of people, the same people a lot of the time. And when you look at this stuff and you're like, well, it seems like there's some kind of narrative that they're trying to push. It seems like they're trying to do this on purpose. Something's up with this. Because, like, also, like, this, the way that the propaganda was very lacking. How do I put this? Like, lacking any kind of nuance or perspective or empathy a lot of the time really made me suspicious too. And it's like, obviously, like, there's this thing because the media hated Trump, and so they tried to, like, tie that in with the COVID thing. But, like, it just seems so suspicious and so bizarre to me that I didn't believe what was going on was the whole truth, and I still don't. I still don't. I don't know if all the stuff that they talked about back in the day is going to happen, because I think enough people, I don't know, I'm just saying, enough people may push back because they see this stuff. I think there's a lot of hubris with regards to people in power. They're less competent than they think they are. They're less persuasive than they think they are. And they live in these bubbles. I don't mean literal bubbles. I don't mean pods, like eat the bugs, live in a pod kind of stuff. I mean, they live in these bubbles. They're ideological bubbles that they live in. They actually believe that they're trying to do something good a lot of the time. Not always, but I think a lot of times they do. And they see people as machines or statistics. It's kind of like my Vietnam video that I did months back. That's why Vietnam failed, with America, because they're technocrats that wanted to, in the literal, I mean, in the old school sense of the term, there was like McNamara was a statistician or whatever, he was a numbers guy basically. He didn't understand human empathy or feeling, and like hearts and minds had to be won, but he didn't know how to do it because I think these people in power just didn't know how humans operate. And I think Fauci is one of those people too. I think he's truly a technocrat. Like, I think he doesn't know, like, about interpersonal things with you, like, on the ground, like on people on the street. I believe it's a lot of hubris and a lot of, like, bureaucratic, like, I think Anna Kachian said she doesn't think Fauci's evil, but she thinks he has this, like, banality of, like, incompetence from being a bureaucrat for 40 or 50 years or whatever he's been in the government. So he's just, like, totally has a lot of cognitive blinders. So I don't know if it's actually his nefarious ideas that he has. I don't know. I'm gonna put a question. I'm gonna say it's a question mark at this point. But that was, like, a lot of the things that they said. So that is why, and on an intellectual level, I questioned the narrative of the last 2.5 years, because I've been involved in a lot of, I mean, I'll just be honest. Yeah, I've been in a lot of conspiracy culture, like, back, I don't really like a lot of it too. I question much of it. I question a lot of the motivations of these people. A lot of them are grifters. A lot of them are kind of half grifters, like a certain person that's been charged $1 billion basically by the government. They're kind of, they're half right some of the time. There's truth to a lot of what they say, but there's a spin to it. It's not really a broken clock. It's like a half broken clock. It's like the clock breaks. The clock is broken. It's like right 4 times a day instead of just 2 times a day. Let's just say that. But it's wrong all the other times. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what basically what happened. And yeah, I've read all sorts of books and stuff about everything that's happened. And, there's a few that I have to read, even though he might be a quack. But yeah, this infamous book, of course, I'm going to read it. I just flashed it on the screen instead. Who knows what YouTube is going to do with this video. But I've read a lot of those books. A lot of them just say the same thing, but a lot of them just do have some insight too. I've read a lot of those books. It doesn't mean, and it's not about, I think that the people in charge just lacked empathy. of regular people. They look down upon regular people, human activities, and there was a very big class element that I've talked about too. Like, the fact of the matter is, not everybody's going to be able to work remotely, and there's going to be people that have to deliver the food to your door. They have to, they have to do the cleaning of the streets or whatever. They have to produce your goods in a factory. There's people involved in that. There's people that were, low income that could not just socially distance for 2 fucking years because they had they were a single mom or something. Like I've said this in a video, they're a single mom and they have like 4 kids or whatever. Oh, that's their responsibility. Yeah, that's fine. I'm just saying that they couldn't socially distance. They had to get a babysitter. They couldn't wear them. They probably maybe they had to watch their they had to like visit their mother who's sick or whatever. Oh, they had to create the bubble. See, a lot of liberals actually after a while, this like backwards rationalization of like actually still seeing people in real life after the quarantine ended. They had this whole thing like in the media for a while. You have your bubble. Your bubble. It might be like 2 groups of friends, but they're bubble. It's like this, like at first you were a piece of shit sociopathic murderer by hanging out with other people that weren't in your family or household, and then you were okay if you had a few people because they're in your bubble. It just was so. I mean, well, at first you were a piece of shit sociopath murderer if you went outside. Then you can protest and burn down a Wendy's for Black Lives Matter, of course. I just had to say that. But yeah, I mean, it's just these narratives. This is why people distrust the narratives, because there was so much hubris and bullshit involved with it. It's like put the factual information out there and have it debated openly and honestly, and try to help people, try to listen to other people, try to actually help people. Like, I mean, for all the opposition to mandates and stuff that I have, America did not do good with, supporting its citizens during this whole thing either. They did better than they could have, but they gave $2,000 here, $1,200 here. That was a lie too. The whole $2,000. Trump was almost prepared to give $3,000 at one point. I remember. I don't know if it was just him trying to get reelected, but it was just like it just was so much shit. This system of capitalism and like this in the way that the very corrupt capitalism that we live in created a lot of the problems that caused the thing in the first place too. I mean, for one, you have this propped up system in China of, okay, so I recently watched this Roger Waters interview where he's kind of excusing China's COVID policy. I was like, oh my God. And I'm just going to say I support him with the Ukraine thing, but that's just terrible. But anyways, we have this propped up system that we propped up in the 70s, this pseudo-capitalist system in China that we work with, for the billionaires to make money, right? It was those systems that created the crisis of the last 2.5 years, because all the funding and all this stuff and, pharmaceutical companies and all this stuff, people trying to do this, and just this nexus of corruption. So what was I trying to say? Oh, I'm just trying to explain why I questioned everything so much. I mean, I just don't think maybe people don't understand like where I'm coming from. Like maybe some of my friends that I don't talk to that much anymore, or whoever, they may not understand why I question these things. Because I mean, the main fact is that people were talking about it for 20, 30 years before, about a lot of things that happened during the whole crisis. Like these weren't, it's like, why would these people be so prescient? I mean, we don't, obviously there was that movie Contagion where they had the bracelets or whatever and stuff like that. But like, this is like, I mean, there's stuff from like the 90s, where they talk about passports or digital currency, as I just mentioned. So, and a lot of the theories, these conspiracy theories about us having to eat the bugs, live in a pod, and be in the metaverse, and like use this and have this like social credit digital currency, which was related to the virus stuff, like because like they said that's why they implemented all this stuff, or that's why they launched the contagion in the first place. It just seems that every day that passes, I'm agnostic about it. Just don't get me wrong, I'm agnostic about it. But every day that passes, it seems like it's more and more plausible that that's why they did all this stuff. Why they want that kind of control over people, I don't know. I don't think that the environment is that in danger. I don't think. I mean, and plus, it doesn't make any sense them pushing electric vehicles when public transportation would probably be a lot better. You know, like high speed rail and stuff. So, but yeah, I'm blathering. That's what I think, and that's kind of an explanation of why. But that's about all.